welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FNR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode is going to be probably another drama-oriented one, I guess. More infighting, if you believe that this is infighting. And to a degree, I don't think it's infighting. But, of course, given the title, it probably would technically classify as infighting. Now, despite what the title says, the person I'm going to shout out now definitely doesn't fit in these categories. Today's shout out goes to Solidarity Media. Solidarity Media is basically a ripoff of what I wanted to do. Nah, I'm just kidding, to a degree. Now, they actually have a very thorough about page, so I'll just be reading that. Solidarity Media was founded in January 2022 with a simple goal to create a platform for progressives to lift each other up. We activists are never short of passion, but the past few years have left us all bruised and exhausted. However, positivity can be transformative, and spreading hope can pave the way for true change. The first podcast Solidarity Media will be presenting is The Meg Slay Show, hosted by Meg Slay. The show will focus on, well, you. People from all walks of life with different experiences and different politics will share their stories and their perspectives. Because the guests will vary, the episodes will vary too, covering topics from incarceration to climate change to artificial intelligence, all presented through a progressive lens. After Solidarity Media wraps up TMSS's launch, we are planning future podcasts, series, and even documentaries hosted by left and left-leaning progressives, so you'll have a range of progressive content to enjoy. As the name implies, it's essentially trying to be a sort of new lefty collective group, but as of now, it's essentially just a passion project of said person, Meg Slay. I haven't seen much of their stuff, but their logo looks cool. I like the, I don't know if this is going to be weird or not, but it kind of looks like the thing from Naruto. It's like a rose, but to a degree, it looks like that thing from Naruto. I don't know what it's called, that symbol. You know, the one they wear on their head. But yeah, you know, they do interviews for the most part from what I've seen, but I'll be checking them out a lot more, and I hope you will too. Maybe one day I'll be on this show. Though, to be fair, they say they talk to activists, and I'm not that, so that's gonna stink. But anyways, let's get right into the news. First, we're gonna be talking about the Colombia election, because that just happened not that long ago. What happened? Well, it looks like we're going to a runoff, and that runoff is sadly not the best outlook. The runoff in this race is Gustavo Petro, obviously, but his opponent is Rodolfo Hernandez, which, as I stated in the episode of the Colombian election, was literally the worst outcome for Petro. The best outcome was probably Fajardo, just because Fajardo's not that popular, but the best one ideologically would have been Federico, because Federico represented, the political establishment. But Hernandez, also being an anti-establishment figure, seems to have basically pinned himself in a very good position to take down Petro. Now, not to be too bleak, but many people have started to notice that objectively, looking at the results on election day, if you just decided to add numbers, things would not look so good for Petro. Because many people have stated, yes, of course, Petro has his 40-something%. Many people have basically said, well, what's left? Essentially, everybody who's voted Petro in the first round is going to vote for him in the second round. We know that. But what about the rest of the people? There were quite a number of other candidates, and none of which really align with Petro by any means. Petro was an openly espoused socialist. The rest of the candidates are not socialists by any means. And since Rodolfo is sort of he's just some generic center-right-ish populist, it's really hard to pin him down. Some people compare him to Trump, some people compare him to Yang, some people compare him to Bolsonaro, but it's essentially very obvious that he's not a socialist. He said some left-ish sounding things, but it's under the veneer of I'm a businessman who knows how to get things done. And as such, the anti-Petro vote has essentially consolidated around him. Enrique Gomez and Federico Gutierrez have already jumped on the Hernandez ship, basically saying the day of the election, Hernandez is the only thing to stop Petro, Ergo, we're going to be backing him. And if you want to be technical, the rest of the candidates, there's really nothing they could do. Ingrid Betancourt and Luis Perez, the two people who dropped out right before the election but still managed to get votes. Ingrid has already backed Hernandez, and unless she backs, Petro in the second round, which is going to be really weird and very unlikely because she is still butthurt over the, kidnapping she faced, and Perez, I don't think he would endorse Petro. The only other two people left in the race that are viable candidates is some fringe evangelical conservative guy who got no votes, and the other candidate, Sergio Fajardo, is basically I guess you could say, he's not even the kingmaker, he's the, you can't really call him the kingmaker because he got 5% of the vote, so there's really nothing to make. Theoretically, he could endorse Petro. He does have center-left-ish tendencies, but overall he's a third away type guy, so he could endorse Petro, but he's already made it abundantly clear that he's going to be negotiating with Hernandez. And the funny thing is, he went to Hernandez, and Hernandez openly just said, no, I don't care about you. He just said, no, because Fajardo, for some reason, decided that he was going to go to Hernandez and say, here's my list of demands for you to change your platform. And Hernandez basically went, no, I'm not going to do that. Now you might say, wait, if he already went to Hernandez, why are you saying that he could potentially back Petro? Well, that's because his party and his vice presidential candidates have already backed Petro for the second round. This election might also be one of those ones that is going to potentially make or break the pink tide again. This isn't as important as, say, Chile, but it's also not they can completely ignore this. This is a very big election because it could probably determine whether or not we're seeing the fullest extent of the pink tide, or if potentially we're seeing the rise of a new blue wave. For those who don't know what that is, the blue wave in Latin American terms is a wave of conservative leaders. Now, the first one was essentially in the mid-2010s, around when the pink tide was dying down, but how the pink tide was reinvigorated under AMLO, there was a new conservative wave that is just a little bit different than the previous one, that essentially follows around Jair Bolsonaro. He's essentially the leader of this right-wing populist wave, rather than more of a traditional conservative wave. Another example would be Nayib Bukele. Basically, they're not going to be the orthodox conservatives. They're this more new brand of right-wing, like Hernandez. He's not a openly right-wing person, but he has a different flavor to it. Nayib Bukele is really a libertarian right kind of guy, and that could potentially lead to a libertarian guy winning in Argentina. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully Petro pulls through, but we don't know. Speaking of Bukele, interesting things are happening now in El Salvador. You see, this news story from the Associated Press talks about a person by the name of Esmeralda Dominguez. Esmeralda Dominguez was 100 yards from her home when soldiers and police blocked her on a small bridge. The authorities waited for 3 hours, and Dominguez was the only person that they stopped. Her aunt was like, yo, what the heck, what are you doing? Basically saying hey, Dominguez, Esmeralda's not a bad person. She runs these organizations, these big, nice organizations that are community organizing. But a soldier told her, we know what we're doing. And they took Esmeralda in a truck and left. And this was on April 19th. And nobody has seen or heard from her since. And this is because over the past 10 weeks, El Salvador security forces have arrested over 36,000 people since Bukele was given the power to suspend certain civil liberties to pursue powerful street gangs. And as such, Bukele is using this as a way to arrest potential people who would oppose him. They mentioned that she was in charge of some civil groups, community organizations. If I had to take a wild guess, they're probably political organizations that don't necessarily align with Bukele 100% of the time. Bukele, like I said before, is basically the next trend of this new wave. Like, he's basically closet right-winger, but he's not even really closet right-winger. He's like a right-winger, obviously, but he's hiding like his real intentions. The dude is literally rounding up people he doesn't like and jailing them. This is definitely like suspect behavior. Unfortunately, much like other Latin American authoritarians, dude is getting really popular at the moment. Like, apparently the latest polls showed that he had like a 60% approval rating. Things are definitely not looking good for El Salvador, and hopefully they'll be able to pull through in the next election, if there is a next election. Speaking of elections, in Mexico, there seems to be leftist unity there, as a candidate in the, what's the state's name? Augustilius? Dang it, I don't know the name of the state, but like basically what happened is there was like a bit of a contentious divide between the Together We Will Make History or Together We Make History coalition. You see, in that state, Morena was actually running a candidacy by themselves. Meanwhile, a person by the name of Martha Marquez was running under the PT and Party Verde coalition, which was the Together We Make History coalition. I didn't really trust her, obviously, because she was recently a member of the PAN right before she went into running in this election. Maybe her intention was to run solely as the PVEM person, or like she wanted to primarily be the PVEM person. But either way, she ended up deciding to suspend her bid and endorse the Morena candidate. So as such, looks like the coalition's back together, baby. There's not really much else I could say on that, except I hope this coalition manages to win. I think this is one of the states where the PAN is expected to win, so maybe this is a last-minute coalition to try and make it so that the margin is smaller. We'll have to wait and see. Speaking of things to have to wait and see, there seems to be a controversy surrounding people who, well, like, for lack of a better term, the podcasters seem to be getting into disagreements with the politicians, as in a state senate seat in New York, District 59, there is a bit of a problem. This, like, as we all know, recently the districts have been redrawn, and as soon as the districts were redrawn, a person by the name of Nomiki Konst has decided to enter the race. Nomiki Konst is a person who worked for the Majority Report and has worked with the Bernie campaign before and has even run for office before, so some people got really excited. However, there was a huge problem. In that seat, there is already a progressive running named Christian Gonzalez, and Gonzalez has earned quite the number of people's support. The New York City DSA, the Working Families Party, Tiffany Caban, and most prominently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which has led to many people turn to Nomiki and accuse her of potentially being a spoiler in this race for Christian Gonzalez. And now there's this huge divide over whether or not Konst should have even entered the race to begin with. Some people are doing a hard line for Konst because they're friends with her or they think that she's a good person, but there are others who are like, dude, why do this at all? And here's the thing. Here's what Konst has said in regards to this race. I found out about this new district a little over a week ago, and I was approached by many people in the community who I have organized with against, like, big real estate, the MTA and Amazon. Like, she basically saying that she was pressured to run in the seat, and seemingly didn't really look further into the race aside from, hey, here's a seat, and people are asking me to run in it, so I will. And a bunch of people, like I said before, like there's Rokana, who announced that he was going to support Konst, but many people immediately got mad because it's like, they're, again, already a progressive candidate in the race. And AOC made it very clear that she's still backing Gonzalez, tweeting the day of, like, again, saying, like, yeah, we should back Gonzalez. My 2 cents in the situation is, like, one, as we all know, I'm not really too big into the spoiler effect or the spoiler myth, but the thing is, I know a lot of the Majority Report people are. I don't know if Konst specifically is in this crowd, but I know that a lot of the people who watch Majority Report are basically the blue no matter who progressives, so it's a little weird that she would instead do this when she would probably get mad at another person who would do this. But another thing is that, I don't think Konst should have ran, at least unless she looked into Gonzalez first. If she did look into Gonzalez and say, hey, I don't like certain things, then maybe she would have had a shot at doing anything viable. But Konst, I'm gonna say something that might be slightly controversial, but it's she's technically done this before. In her last run for public office, she ran for the New York Public Advocate race, and while she was the first candidate to announce she was gonna run, she remained in the race even as more viable progressive options came into the fray: Jumaine Williams, Melissa Mark Viverito. Now, I know at least for Jumaine, there was an issue because he, in the past, made some socially conservative comments, so maybe she actually felt but at the end of the day, she still ran against progressives. Now, I don't really have any thoughts on Nomiki Konst herself. I did technically support her public advocate race as well as Jumaine Williams, and I probably won't be ending up supporting anybody in this race just because it's a state senate race in a state that I don't live in, so there's really no point in me supporting it. But if I had to give Nomiki any advice, it would be, you should have looked into this seat and the candidates running in it before you made your decision. That's one thing I'm really tired of. I don't like when progressives run against other progressives, but not because I believe in a spoiler fight, but because it's just we need to be focusing our energy to the one person. And I might say that's just spoiler talk, but with other words, which maybe it is, but I truly do believe that it'd be best interests for us to unite against the establishment with the one candidate. That's one thing I see on Twitter all the time. I think it's changed a little bit since then because I've made it publicly known that I'm not really a fan of this. But the idea of oh, look at all these great candidates running. We need to support these great candidates running, and they put people in the same district. It's stop it. No. We pick one, then we throw the other one in the garbage. Pick one. We don't have to ruin their career, but it's they're not important. All the episodes of my problems with are literally just when organizations do that. That's all I really have to say on that. Let's move on to the last story. This story is where we see a lot of issues. Again, about blue no matter who, people don't necessarily think that no more. And basically, here's what's happening. Bakari Sellers, a guy who is essentially the guy who essentially the establishment wants to groom for something, I don't know what, but they want to groom him for something, is going to be spending $1 million on a political action committee called the Urban Empowerment Action PAC, and will be trying to back candidates who are, quote, dedicated to educational empowerment and economic uplifting of black communities. But here's the thing. They're spending $1 million on one particular candidate, that candidate being Janice Winfrey, who is running against Rashida Tlaib. The reason they're claiming to support the PAC is because her campaign will restore infrastructure, improve educational opportunities in the district, and support the Biden-Harris agenda in D.C. Now, here's the thing. That's weird because Rashida Tlaib does that too. She literally does all of those things that they said. But you take a little closer glance and you'll see the group is made up of a coalition of black and Jewish business leaders. I see how it is. It's basically another oh, she's anti-Israel, ergo they gotta get rid of her. Now, he's trying to defend this any way he can by saying, we are hoping that we can have a candidate that doesn't have varying distractions. Now, the reason why this is notable is because, as we remember, this isn't the first time they've tried to do this. If we remember in the last election, they actually decided to run primary campaigns against all three members of the squad. Not the specific PAC, but people who are in this sort of vein trying to do this. AOC had Michelle Caruso Cabrera, Ilhan Omar had Antoine Milino Manu, or whatever his name was, and what was her name? Brenda Jones? don't remember. The one who won the special election against Rashida Tlaib in the first place before losing to Rashida Tlaib in the regular election, they tried to run her in that seat as well, but the problem was none of those candidacies actually panned out, and people were hyping them up like way bigger than they actually were. But it seems that perhaps this cycle they're going to try something a little different. You see, maybe they're looking at the GOP and noticing maybe they can change something else. Because if you remember, the GOP managed to get rid of Madison Cawthorn by putting a bunch of their money into his primary challenger. Now, in that same vein, they could have done that to Marjorie Taylor Greene, but they didn't do it. They did it to Madison Cawthorn. But those elections were really close to each other. And now, the PAC that takes open credit for getting rid of Madison Cawthorn has focused their intentions on Lauren Boebert. So it seems that maybe the Democrats are going to try and do the same thing. They're going to focus on one squad member at a time instead of spreading their resources thin to try and take them all down. Well, okay, they didn't try to take down Ayanna Pressley, but she's a lot more in line with party lines. Like, I mean, remember, New York just redrew their district so that it would have Mondaire Jones fight against Jamal Bowman. Maybe that was them trying to indicate, hey, Jones, get rid of Jamal now. But, of course, Jones didn't take the bait. And it looks like he will be suffering the consequences of that. So we'll have to wait and see how this pans out. If I had to take a guess, it'll be just as well as Brenda Jones did. With that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. For those who don't know what this is, the dumb left was a term that was originally coined by people around the Majority Report. Basically, people they felt were a hindrance to the left in some capacity. As the name implies, they were calling them dumb, and this was mostly put towards the Jimmy Dore crowd, the people like him. Now, it was originally sort of coined in 2017, basically, right around the time, the Bernie camp ended, and, we were in the new wave of progressive politics, I guess. With the rise of the alt-right, many people thought that there needed to be a term for the left. Many people were like the control left, or the alt-left, or the dirtbag left. Each of which sort of have, varying degrees of, positivity or negativity. But dumb left is what usually ended up sticking around. Many people were in this sort of category, and as such, there was a popular image that went around that was made by a Brooks fan that basically showed a ton of the people in the dumb left, and they even gave a little bit of a description to explain who they are. They are, quote, useful idiots or sheepdoggers for the alt-right, mostly privileged white men, fooled by the crypto-fascist Tulsi, outclassed in every way by Cedar, Dixon, Kasparian. The image had 16 people on the list. Here are the list in the order that they are: Niall Elcom, Jimmy Dore, Draft Tulsi, Kentucky Spaz, Grumpy Bertie Sanders, America Vest, Nico House, Divine Deanikin, Caitlin Johnson, Tim Canova, Shauna Burley, Michael Tracy, Fisher Burton, Progressive Blacksmith, H.A. Goodman, and Glenn Greenwald. As the name implies, these were basically the people who were super fans of Tulsi and seemingly as the thing implies, quote unquote sheepdoggers to the alt-right. As the list goes, it's varying degrees of accuracy. I don't know if that one was hyperbole, but these were people that were sort of in the new populist left, or we're the anti-authoritarian left, or the libertarian left, that sort of stuff. And that term has essentially remained part of the mainstream left-wing discourse. There's always some people saying the dumb left. But the problem is there was an issue. This list would eventually become dated to many degrees of accuracy. For starters, some of these people I don't even know. Like Kentucky Spaz and Devin Danikin, I literally have no clue who these people are. America Vest and Grumpy Bertie Sanders would eventually disappear. Tim Canova, Shauna Burley, and H.A. Goodman, it would essentially just become right-wingers. New faces entered the scene. Niall Elcom would meet me, and as such, he would no longer be classified in the dumb left. As such, it was time for a new dumb left, and I decided that I was going to be the person to try and bring a new dumb left into the scene. For many reasons, I basically decided that it was best to get a brand new list. Maybe I would spread that around to explain this list, and as such, I actually made one, and I actually even made a podcast where I explain this new list. For those who don't know, here's what the new list is, like the new blurb that I gave it. Like, I gave it a blurb that was more accurate to a degree. Meet the new dum-dum left, and I put left in air quotes. Individuals who would rather spend their time hindering the left rather than building it up usually make the claim that they are the real left while propping up fascists. Usually can be found with these emojis, and I include the hibiscus, the hourglass, the T-Rex, the clover, the dove, and the hat. Because those were symbols of people who were claiming to be part of like the real left. You know, the Tolstans, the Assange people, the Ventura people, and to a degree the Yang Gang people. Funnily enough, I included the Yang hat, but I didn't actually include any like actual, like I didn't include like the actual any Yang Gangers. Now, I kept some of the people that were still around. Like, I mean, some of the people I felt were just a little too much to bear. Like, I kept Jimmy Dore, Nico House, Shauna Burley, Grumpy Bertie Sanders, Draft Tulsi, because those were the people that I essentially felt were still in, like, relevant at the time. Not that long. I mean, I think, like, by the end of the year, Grumpy Bertie Sanders would be gone, so I ended up having to make a new list again. And I even kept around the Progressive Blacksmith, hence rebranded the Leftist Blacksmith. Oh wait, I even included Tracy, my bad. I included those two. Like, I mean, Tracy, I kept him around because Tracy's still somewhat relevant, but I kept the Leftist Blacksmith around because, I mean, I honestly couldn't fill in the spot, and I was like, he says sort of dum-dum left stuff, so I guess he still counts. Stinks, but, I mean, that's what happened. And here are the new people I added to the list. Sarcasm Stardust, Caleb Maupin, Richard Medhurst, Fiorella Isabel, Marie Fonseca, J.V. Graz, Slow Newsday, Samir Khan, and Primo Nutmeg. Because they were sort of new faces that entered the scene. The ones that rose to the top to be able to compete with the people who preceded them. But here's another issue. You see, things have sort of changed again. 2022 is a vastly different year than 2020. More people have entered the scene, and as such, many different people have entered the dum-dum left. But here's another issue. They aren't the same branch of the dum-dum left. You see, originally it was very easy to just say, oh, the dum-dum left was just these people, like the Jimmy Dore fans. But now you get people who are not fans of Jimmy Dore, who you would probably classify as dum-dum left as well. People who are dum-dum left for different reasons. And sometimes the differences can be so little that it's like, do these count as different aspects of the dum-dum left or not? It's an incredibly confusing era to pinpoint who and what is exactly dum-dum left. And being who I am, I decided that I would take to the task of pinpointing who is the new dum-dum left. And hopefully these categories are going to be sticking around because I don't think that I can really add any more. Now, before we get into it, I should say, like, as I mentioned before, I think some of these categories sort of overlap with each other, but I'm trying to make it, like, explicitly hardline the differences. And some of these groups might not technically be relevant anymore, but they kind of are, but in different degrees. Like, some of these probably are still holdovers from the 2020 election, but the reason why is because, to a degree, they are still somewhat relevant, just under different titles. So here we go. Here is the new dum-dum left. Now, before we begin, I should mention one category that I debated putting on here, but didn't. I don't necessarily know what you would describe them as, but the ones, like, the one that seems, and the reason why I didn't put them all in the same, I didn't put this one in a separate category is because this category is called something along the lines of, like, the anti-science left or the anti-vax left. These are basically all the people who are on the quote-unquote left that seem to hate on vaccines. The reason why I didn't include this one in its own section is because, to a degree, this factors into every single other section. Okay, maybe with the exception of 2, but maybe 3, but you'll get to that. Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. a lot of people in these factions seem to heavily be anti-vaccine, and some of these people in those same sections might also be super pro-vaccine. So, like, I mean, there's also this degree of, like, oh, we're not saying that vaccines are bad, but we're also saying, like, we're skeptical of them. So it's hard to put them into a specific category. So let's begin with the actual categories. I think it would be unfair for me to begin this category without talking about the one that started it all. This is technically going to ruin the title and stuff, but this is the one that started it all. The anti-establishment populists. These are peoples whose politics are defined by being vaguely anti-establishment, usually in the veneer of leftism, and push for some sort of like populist alliance with the right. Like, oh, if we work together with the populist right wing, we'll be able to actually manage to get like the rid of the establishment. We need to unite together to fight the common enemy. Now the thing is, these guys aren't even socialists. They'll complain all day long about capitalism, like how cronyism and like corporations, but these guys aren't even socialists. Like, I mean, well, maybe one is a socialist, but a lot of these guys are not socialists at all. In fact, some of them might even critique socialism to a degree. Here are the examples of this category. The main man himself, Jimmy Dore, with other people like Chris DeBall, Shoe on Head, Nick Brana, and also Socialist MMA. I include him in this list because, like, even though I said that this category is sort of like not socialist and his name implies he is socialist, he does also sort of push this sort of like a left-right populist alliance. He essentially whitewashed Fred Hampton's record to essentially pretend that this is what Fred Hampton would have wanted, even though Fred Hampton was a openly avowed Maoist. The next category is one that has become a lot more prevalent nowadays, the tankies. Tankies are, for those who don't know, people who admire the literal worst aspects of communism and try to pretend Stalin was not as bad. Basically, they usually simp for like Russia, China, and like Nicaragua. They'll usually put like racial and sexual issues on the back burner. Like, oh, they'll pretend that they like it until they get to the point where they don't. Like, for example, one of them might go, hey, we don't support the walkout of Netflix employees against Chappelle because it's not really like a workers' revolution. But then, like, a couple months later, they'll go, why can children get on hormone blockers? The people in this category would be like Caleb Maupin, Jackson Hinkle, Haas, and George Galloway, even though George Galloway is not really like a online person. He's more like a politician and like a pundit. Well, maybe, I guess he technically counts. These guys claim to have they're like a real like socialist. They're the real leftists or communists. But technically, to a degree, they don't even call themselves out. Like, they might actually even go so far as to say they're not leftist. But that's a different category. Next category is the quote-unquote anti-imperialists, quote-unquote journalists. These are people who claim to want to show the fair side of world affairs. You know, like we're going to combat the Western media's narrative, and instead we're going to be focusing on anti-imperialism journalism. You know, like what's really going on in these foreign countries? Like what's really going on in Syria? What's really going on in China? What's really going on in Iran? These guys are sort of like tankies, but you see, the thing is, these guys actually have like a less veneer of leftism. Like tankies, they literally like do like hammer and sickle everywhere they go. But like these guys don't even really like talk about leftism that much. They literally just talk like their ideology is essentially summed up: America bad, other country good. Examples of people in this category would be Max Blumenthal, Aaron Matei, Ben Norton, and Richard Medhurst. Now, this next category is really weird because you would wonder, well, why is this even a category? But unfortunately, people are stupid. This category, I've literally titled, literally not even leftists. These are people who basically flat out admit that they are not on the left. Like, they'll say something that is very openly anti-left wing, or they'll do something very openly anti-left wing, but they somehow still pretend that they are, and somehow people still buy it, even though they point blank state that they are not leftists. This category seemed to originally start with like misguided libertarians, which is basically what dominates this category, who interpret the term left libertarian as literally meaning the right-wing Libertarian Party of America. They'll usually be like, oh, I'm left-wing, really? Because of what? Oh, I'm in favor of weed legalization. That's not a left-wing issue. They're right-wingers who support weed legalization too. Oh, I'm a left-winger because I am anti-interventionist. They're right-wingers who are anti-interventionists. Like, these guys, like, whatever they claim is left-wing is not left-wing. Like I said, like, they'll be like, we're not interventionists, or we like marijuana legalization. Or they'll say, like, oh, we are against the establishment. But it's like, literally none of that makes you left-wing. There are right-wingers who do every single thing they say. And I have proof of this. You just had to look in a mirror. The people in this category are Yo Pasta, Samir Khan, Sky Daddy, and Kim Iverson. Each of these people have literally flat out admitted that they are not leftists. Sky Daddy made a video like why I left the left. Kim Iverson said that she's going to be voting Republican for basically the rest of her life. Yo Pasta openly stated that he is not a socialist or a communist. And Samir Khan literally also stated that, but also her actions make it very clear that she's a theocrat. The next category was the first category that seemed to make people realize that this was a thing, that the thing that might have shifted a lot of the people who would supposedly be on the dumb left. The Assange cultists. The Assange cultists are people who seem to have turned Julian Assange into a singular issue, and everything else is basically nothing. They're still kind of around. Technically, these guys have mostly moved on, but the people who started this movement are still relatively notable for this group, so technically, I put them in this category. Examples of this would be Steve Poinkiney, Sarcasm Stardust, and Taylor Hudek. The next category is also a little bit of a holdout from the 2020 elections. The fringe candidate supporters. People who claim to be progressives, but didn't back Bernie in 2020 and instead backed a fringe candidate, whether it be Yang, Tulsi, Ventura, Lariva, Kishore. Basically everybody who didn't back Bernie in that election. Well, technically, yes, that category is also sort of irrelevant because we're not in that point anymore, but this category still has some lingering effects. Like, the Ventura people are still around, they just don't call themselves the Ventura people anymore. The Toll Stands are still around, they just don't call themselves the Toll Stands anymore. The people in this category would be Nico House, Michael Tracy, and Chad Wilson. The next category is the AOC derangement syndromers, people who are supposedly on the left, whose entire politics can basically be summed up as AOC and squad bad. Like, basically, that's their entire philosophy. Okay, well, scratch that. They have, like, sometimes they'll have an addendum to include all of DSA, like, oh, AOC, squad, DSA, bad. And the reason why, like, these guys aren't really, like, these guys don't veer away from the AOC and the squad too much. Like, they don't have any really big policy disagreements, or, like, they're not really, like, communists or anything of the sort. These are people that are literally just, they basically liked the squad 2 minutes ago, and then they changed their mind because it's popular to hate things and not like things. Examples in this category would be Ryan Knight, Brianna Joy Gray, Seema Hernandez, and Paula Jean Swearingen. The next category is one that can sort of define the rest of the categories to a degree, well, the ones that I mentioned beforehand, but I gave this one a specific one in of itself because there's some differences between the rest of the things. You'll see what I mean. The class reductionists. The people who are 100% with us on economics. You know, they'll usually be like socialist or social democratic. But they're like really close to being perfect. Like, oh, they're so amazing. Like, they're so awesome. But they're willing to concede on some veneer of social issues to get broader appeal. These guys are basically like the baby populists, but they don't like them. Like, these guys are like, oh, we don't like Jimmy Dore, we don't like Crystal Ball, we don't like all these people, but they also kind of do a little bit of the things that they do. But they're also, again, to a degree, pretty good. People like this would be like Ben Burgess and Kyle Kalinske. Kalinske a little bit more. I don't know much about Burgess. Maybe Burgess has shifted to being one of the full-blown other categories. I don't know. But this is essentially the category for Kyle, because Kyle sort of has this, like, weird thing where it's like, he, again, like, tries to do, like, the left-wing, right-wing populist alliance, but he's also, like, not as diehard. Like, again, like, he will drop some veneer of social issues, but he won't actually drop the social issues. Like, if you actually told him, like, hey, you can win, just drop the freaking gay marriage thing, he'll be like, no, that's stupid. But he'll also be like, oh, this is weird, like, all this, like, new weird gender stuff, but it's like, stuff like that. He'll be like, you need to drop that kind of stuff. Like, where he, like, there was this weird time where he literally said, like, AOC put all of her time and energy into social issues, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, literally, what are you talking about? It's like, and she should have focused on the BIF and the BBB. It's like, what are you actually talking about? He literally made, like, a class reductionist argument when it wasn't even there. The next category is sort of like this, but a lot more blatant. They're called the useful idiots. Now, the useful idiots are the people who claim to hate literally any of the other categories. Like, they'll claim to hate, like, the populists, they'll claim to hate the tankies, they'll claim to hate basically any of the other groups. But they will basically do apologetics for them and parrot literally every single one of their talking points. Like, they'll go, yeah, Jackson Hinkle and Caleb Maupin are kind of cringe, but also, like, they're 100% right on, like, Ukraine being, like, super evil and we need to, like, bomb Ukraine and get Russia to be taking them over. Yeah, Jimmy Dore really is, like, a really bad person and he's, like, really, really dumb. But, I mean, he does have a point in the force to vote BS. The people in this category would be Chris Richards, Bana Banana, and Hassan Piker. The next category is the group of people that don't get talked about at all because of the dumb left. Like, they don't get talked about at all when you talk about dumb left, even though I put them in the same category. The liberals. Now, what do I mean by liberal? I mean, like, liberal as in, like, 10 paces left on a good day, 10 paces right if it affects them personally. They're people who, like, claim to 100% be on our side. Like, oh yeah, we hate Jimmy Dore, we hate, like, this stuff. Oh, we love Bernie, we love all this stuff. But then they will basically just do everything in their power to diminish the left. Like, literally, point blank, turn the left and go, you're bad. Oh, you're a tanky because you believe that Che Guevara is a good person. Oh, you're basically like some sort of, like, Jimmy Doreite because you believe that the Democrats and the squad should probably do a little bit more. Oh, you're a bad person and, like, you're a tanky because you believe that the U.S. should openly state that they're not going to be engaging militarily in Ukraine. The people in this category would be, like, people like David Pakman, Matt Dimitri, Brian Bakunin. You know, again, like, the people who claim to be on our side, but then will literally stab the left in the back in, like, this. Matt Dimitri, like, literally posted, like, stuff like, oh, Brooks was actually dumb left because he liked Telliser. Brian now literally thinks that the person who is basically one of the leading voices against the dumb left, like Jeff Campbell, is actually part of, like, a Russian conspiracy. David Pakman, oh, you can't support BDS because that's anti-Semitic. Dylan Burns would be another example that I didn't put on here. And the last category I saved because, honestly, of all the categories, they're, like, the least offensive. But they're still there, and they're an issue. They're the smallest issue of the bunch. Like, if I had to choose, like, snap my fingers and I only have one of these, this would be the one that I would keep around. Some people make them, like, a bigger threat than they actually are, but, I mean, honestly, I don't really see that much of an issue. I see some of the issue, but you'll see when I actually explain who they are. This category is known as the woke scolds. The woke scolds are the people who have literally the exact opposite problem of the class reductionists. Not that they focus 100% on woke issues, you know, like social issues and stuff, but they do put a lot of emphasis on it to a degree that you would even argue probably is too much. You know, like the people who would, like, make the fear of retribution look real, or, like, white guys can't have an opinion on X because these are cis white men. Black people can't be racist. You know, quote unquote, the next generation of SJW. If you're a white male and you say like the slightest edgy thing, you're canceled forever. But if you're a black person and you say like the biggest sus thing ever, you get a pass. Examples of this would be Professor Flowers, Noah Samson, and Thought Slime. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the new categories of the Dumb Dumb Left. If you have a category or a person that you think should probably be mentioned a lot more, leave them in the comments or something, I don't know. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check my articles on the Independent Political Report, or consider supporting me on Patreon.